Okay, so you want to own a cattle farm. Buy the land, stock the herd, sell at market, watch the checks roll in. That's the plan in your head. And unlike a lot of what we cover on this channel, it's a plan that actually works for some people. Here's the catch. A cattle farm is not a herd of animals. It is a leveraged commodity business with a 500-day production cycle, exposed to a price you don't set and a feed bill you can't skip. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what it takes to make a cattle farm profitable, and whether you're the kind of owner who can pull it off. Let's start with what it actually costs to get in. The land is the number that stops most people before they start. Raising land runs anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 an acre, depending on region, and a modest cow-calf operation needs 1.5 to 2 acres per animal. So a starter herd of 50 cows can mean 75 to 100 acres, or $150,000 to $400,000 in land alone before you've bought a single cow. That's the number that ends most conversations. It's also the number most new owners try to work around by leasing instead of buying. Grazing leases run $20 to $50 an acre per year, a real path in, but one that caps your long-term equity. First, the herd itself. A bred cow ready to calve runs $1,500 to $2,500 depending on breed and market conditions. 50 head is $75,000 to $125,000 before the first calf hits the ground. Second, fencing, water, and handling infrastructure. Perimeter and cross-fencing for 75 to 100 acres, plus a working chute and water system, runs $30,000 to $80,000 depending on terrain and how much is already in place. Third, equipment. A used tractor, hay equipment, and a stock trailer. Even buying secondhand runs $40,000 to $100,000. And here's the first trap nobody budgets for, the working capital gap. You will pay for feed, vet care, and labor every single month for roughly 10 months before your first calf crop is old enough to sell. That gap, feeding a herd you can't yet sell, runs $30,000 to $60,000 in cash you need sitting in reserve, earning nothing before a single check arrives. Add it up, and a modest 50-head starter operation costs $275,000 to $665,000 to get running, and we haven't sold a single calf yet. But what did you actually buy? Not a herd of animals in the way the postcard suggests. What you bought is closer to a leveraged land position with a biological production line attached, an asset whose output price is set daily by a commodity futures market you have no influence over, denominated in an input cost, feed, that moves independently and often in the opposite direction. Think of it less like ranching and more like running a small manufacturing plant that buys one volatile commodity, feed and land carrying cost, to produce another volatile commodity, live cattle, and has no control over either price. That's not a lifestyle business. That's a leveraged bet on two markets moving in your favor at the same time. Now let's follow the money that moves every single month, because this is where the real business hides. Feed. Even on decent pasture, most operations supplement with hay through winter. $800 to $1,500 per cow per year in feed and hay costs, depending on region and drought conditions. Veterinary and herd health. Vaccinations, breeding soundness exams, and routine care run $50 to $150 per cow per year, but a disease outbreak, pink eye, respiratory illness moving through a herd, can multiply that overnight across every animal you own. Labor and equipment maintenance. Even a family-run operation underprices its own labor, and machinery depreciation and repair on tractors, balers, and trucks runs $15,000 to $40,000 a year on a 50-head operation. And here's the mechanism inversion nobody expects. You are not the one setting your price. The real margin in the cattle industry sits with the packers and processors who buy finished cattle at a price set by a market dominated by 4 companies controlling roughly 80% of U.S. beef processing. You raise the risk. They set the number. You are a price taker in a business where almost everyone downstream of you is a price maker. That's the part nobody budgets for. So the annual operating cost lands somewhere between $900 and $1,800 per cow for a herd that takes roughly 2 full years from breeding to a marketable calf crop generating steady revenue. Run that forward on a 50-head herd, and you're looking at $45,000 to $90,000 a year in fixed operating costs before a single bad season. And fragility here is structural. A single drought year can double your hay and supplemental feed costs while simultaneously depressing the price you receive, because everyone else's herd is thinning out at the same time yours is. Just when the math starts to feel survivable, one bad season turns a break-even operation into a 6-figure loss inside a single production cycle. In March of 2012, a man named Curtis Rowan, running a 200-head cattle operation outside Kearney, Nebraska, had done almost everything right. He'd expanded from his father's 80-head herd starting in 2008, taking advantage of strong cattle prices, financing the expansion through a bank-operating loan secured against the land. By 2011, local agricultural press had profiled his operation as a model of smart generational expansion. The problem wasn't the cattle. The problem was 2012, one of the worst droughts in the region's recorded history. Pasture that normally supported his herd through summer was bare by June. Hay prices, driven by the same drought across the entire Midwest, tripled from $80 to $240 a ton. Rowan's annual feed budget of roughly $70,000 climbed past $210,000 within a single season, while the same drought conditions pushed cattle prices down as ranchers across the region sold off animals they could no longer feed. He sold 60 head at a loss just to reduce his feed burden, financed the remaining shortfall with a second operating loan, and by early 2013 owed more against the operation than the land and herd combined were worth. He sold the remaining herd and leased out the land in the spring of 2013. The answer is not personal incompetence. The answer is structural. But here's the part nobody tells you. Cattle farming does work. And there's a witness for that too. In 2015, a family named the Bennetts started a 40-head cattle operation on inherited land outside Sheridan, Wyoming, with almost identical starting conditions to Rowan's. Modest herd size, drought-prone region, no outside capital beyond the land itself. The difference showed up in year 2. Instead of selling weaned calves into the commodity market the way Rowan did, the Bennetts kept their cattle through finishing and sold the beef directly to consumers. Quarter and half cow shares sold straight to families within driving distance, bypassing the packer entirely. By 2018, 3 years in, they were selling 100% of their annual production direct to consumer at $6 to $9 a pound, compared to the $1.80 to $2.40 a pound commodity price Rowan had been exposed to. Their gross revenue per animal ran 3 to 4 times the commodity equivalent. Their net income by 2019, on a herd less than a quarter the size of Rowan's at his peak, ran $65,000 to $85,000 a year. Genuine, sustainable profit, not a bad year survival number. They didn't avoid drought. Wyoming had one too, in 2017. But their direct-to-consumer pricing gave them enough margin per animal to absorb a bad feed year without needing to sell into a depressed market at the worst possible moment. So what's the single structural variable that separated Rowan from the Bennetts? It wasn't luck, and it wasn't work ethic. Both men worked equally hard. It was who set the price. Rowan sold into a market where the price was set entirely outside his operation, by packers, by futures, markets, by a drought hitting every ranch in his region at once. When his costs spiked, his revenue simultaneously fell. The two lines moved against him at exactly the same time. The Bennetts sold into a market where they set the price. When their costs spiked in 2017, their revenue didn't move because their customers weren't buying a commodity. They were buying a relationship and a product, and that price is sticky in a way a futures contract never is. The answer is not personal incompetence. The answer is who controls the number on the invoice. So what does profitability actually require? On the commodity path, the Rowan path. A cow-calf operation typically needs 150 to 300 head before fixed costs are spread thin enough to generate real per-head margin. Below that scale, you are, structurally, farming to break even, not to profit. On the direct-to-consumer path, the Bennett path. Profitability is achievable at 30 to 60 head, but requires a genuinely different skill set. Marketing, customer relationships, food safety compliance, and a processing and delivery logistics chain that most commodity ranchers have never had to build. Years to break even. 3 to 5 years on either path, assuming no catastrophic weather event in that window. Typical net margin once established. 8 to 15% on the commodity path at scale. 20 to 35% on the direct-to-consumer path at a fraction of the herd size. That's a Tesla versus a used sedan. Same road, completely different fuel economy. Let's simulate it. Same land, same starting herd, same owner. 2 different years. The good year. Feed and hay run $50,000. Vet and herd health, $5,500. Labor and equipment maintenance, $22,000. No disease outbreak, no drought. Total operating cost, roughly $77,500. On a direct-to-consumer 50-head operation selling at an average $7 a pound, gross revenue runs $180,000 to $220,000. Net profit for the year, $100,000 to $140,000. A genuinely life-changing number for a family operation. Now, the bad year. Same fixed costs. Feed baseline, labor, equipment. Climbed to $95,000 as drought pushes hay prices up 60%. A respiratory outbreak requires emergency veterinary intervention across a third of the herd, $12,000. Total operating cost, $107,000. Revenue holds steadier than the commodity path would because direct-to-consumer pricing doesn't collapse with the drought. But a portion of the herd has to be sold early at a discount to reduce feed pressure, cutting gross revenue to $150,000. Net profit, $43,000. A hard year, but still a profit, not the six-figure loss Rowan faced. That's the entire difference between the two witnesses in one chart. One man's bad year was a bankruptcy. The other family's bad year was still a paycheck. So can you own a cattle farm? Yes, with real, specific conditions. If you're entering the commodity path, you need $400,000 or more in starting capital, a realistic path to 150 plus head within 5 years, and the risk tolerance to survive a drought year that could otherwise end the operation. This is a full-time business, not a side income, and it rewards scale and generational land ownership more than it rewards a first-generation entrant. If you're entering the direct-to-consumer path, you need less capital to start. $150,000 to $250,000 is realistic for 30 to 50 head, but you need a genuinely different skill set. Marketing, customer relationships, and a willingness to sell meat, not cattle. This path is more accessible to a first-generation owner, and it's the path that actually produced a profitable outcome in the case study you just watched. If your plan is to buy land, stock a herd, and sell into the commodity market with no plan for how you'll survive a bad year, the math is not on your side. It was never on Curtis Rowan's side either, and he did almost everything right. You didn't buy a cattle farm. You bought a bet on who gets to set the price, and the only owners who win are the ones who make sure it's them.